The crimson sunset bled across the horizon as Lillian Clarke stood at the edge of Salida, Colorado, her heart as heavy as the trunk at her feet. It was 1876, and the small frontier town nestled in the Rocky Mountains was supposed to have been her salvation, not another crossroads of heartbreak. The stagecoach that had brought her here disappeared into a cloud of dust, carrying away her last chance to change her mind. Lillian adjusted her simple blue dress, a hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. 6 weeks along, the doctor had told her back in St. Louis. 6 weeks pregnant and already abandoned. "Miss, you planning on standing there till nightfall?" The gruff voice startled her from her thoughts. A weathered man with salt and pepper whiskers gestured toward her trunk. "Town's that way, and these mountains get mighty cold after dark." "Thank you, sir." Lillian mustered a smile. "Can you direct me to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, 3 blocks down, white house with the blue trim?" He tipped his hat before continuing on his way. Lillian had barely taken 2 steps when a commotion erupted down the main street. A group of men burst from the saloon, surrounding 2 others locked in a heated argument. Her trunk momentarily forgotten, she watched as one man, tall and broad-shouldered with a distinctive black Stetson, placed himself between the angry mob and a smaller, terrified-looking gentleman. He cheated. Someone shouted, "I saw him palming cards." Another voice joined. The man in the black hat spoke calmly, his voice carrying across the distance. "Anybody who thinks shooting a man over $5 is good business can take it up with my Winchester first." The crowd hesitated, muttering among themselves before slowly dispersing. Lillian found herself staring, impressed by how easily he had diffused the situation without a shot being fired. When he turned, she quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught watching. But not before she glimpsed piercing blue eyes beneath the hat's brim. "Need some help with that trunk, madam?" The deep voice was closer than she expected. She turned to find him standing just a few paces away, those same blue eyes now focused intently on her. "I couldn't impose," Lillian replied, suddenly conscious of her travel-worn appearance. "No imposition." He removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair that fell just shy of his collar. "Adam Irwin, I'd be happy to assist a newcomer to our little town." "Lillian Clarke," she offered, extending her gloved hand, which he took with surprising gentleness. "I'm heading to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house." Adam nodded, lifting her trunk with ease. "Best pie in the territory. You chosen Salida for any particular reason, Miss Clarke?" The question, innocent as it was, made her tense. "A fresh start," she said simply. Something in her tone must have discouraged further inquiry because he merely nodded. "Salida's good for those." They walked in comfortable silence. Adam occasionally pointing out landmarks: the general store, the doctor's office, the schoolhouse where they were still searching for a teacher. Lillian listened politely, though her mind was elsewhere, calculating how long her meager savings might last while she searched for work. At the boarding house, Mrs. Holloway, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, greeted them warmly. "Adam Irwin playing the gentleman again," she teased, ushering them inside. "Just doing my civic duty, Margaret," he replied with an easy smile, setting Lillian's trunk down in the modest front parlor. "Miss Clarke will be staying with us for a while," Mrs. Holloway said. "I've got the corner room ready, the one with the morning sun." Adam replaced his hat. "Then I'll leave you in Margaret's capable hands. Welcome to Salida, Miss Clarke." After he departed, Mrs. Holloway showed Lillian to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. The older woman chattered amiably about town gossip, pausing occasionally to ask gentle questions about Lillian's circumstances. "No family then?" she asked, helping Lillian unpack her few belongings. "None to speak of," Lillian replied carefully. "My parents passed several years ago, Mrs." Holloway's eyes softened with understanding. "Well, you've come to the right place. Salida might be small, but we look after our own." She patted Lillian's hand. "Now rest up. Supper's at 6. Alone at last, Lillian sank onto the narrow bed, one hand again finding her stomach. The journey from St. Louis had been long and uncomfortable, but necessary after Harrison's reaction to her news. His handsome face had transformed from shock to anger to cold calculation in mere moments. "This will ruin me," he'd said flatly. "My father would disinherit me. You understand that's impossible." The next morning he was gone. No goodbye, just a hastily scrawled note and enough money for a train ticket west. The son of one of St. Louis's wealthiest families couldn't be saddled with a seamstress's unexpected pregnancy. A tear slid down her cheek, which she hastily wiped away. Self-pity wouldn't feed her child. Tomorrow she would begin looking for work. Morning brought golden sunlight streaming through her window, along with the scent of coffee and baking bread. Lillian dressed quickly in her second-best dress, a modest gray affair with minimal embellishments, and made her way downstairs. 3 other boarders sat at the large oak table. An elderly gentleman who introduced himself as Mr. Peterson, the telegraph operator, a middle-aged widow, Mrs. Finch, who owned the millinery shop, and a young man named Thomas Green who worked at the bank. "We've been needing a school teacher, something fierce," Mrs. Finch commented after learning Lillian was seeking employment. "The last one left to get married 6 months ago." "I've had some experience tutoring," Lillian admitted, though she'd never formally taught in a classroom. "That's more than anyone else has offered," Mr. Peterson chimed in. "You should speak with Mayor Daniels today." By noon, Lillian found herself appointed as Salida's new school teacher. The position came with a small salary and a room at the schoolhouse, though Mayor Daniels agreed she could continue boarding with Mrs. Holloway until she felt settled. "Classes start Monday next," he informed her, a portly man with an impressive mustache. "We've got 26 children aged 6 to 16. Some can only attend when farm work permits, mind you." "I understand," Lillian assured him, already mentally cataloging what supplies she might need. As she left the mayor's office, a familiar figure leaned against the hitching post outside. "Heard you're our new schoolmarm," Adam said, pushing away from the post as she approached. Today, without the tension of the near brawl, she could better appreciate his features, the strong jawline softened by smile lines at the corners of his eyes, the confident set of his broad shoulders. "Word travels fast in Salida," she observed. "One of its charms," he agreed, falling into step beside her, "and occasional curses." His tone was light, but something in his expression suggested he understood the value of privacy better than most. "Does everyone know everyone's business here?" Adam chuckled. "They try their damnedest, but folks generally mean well." He glanced sideways at her. "Most of us came here looking to start over one way or another, and what were you starting over from, Mr. Irwin?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. If he was offended, he didn't show it. "The war," he said simply. 4 years of seeing things no man should. Came west after Appomattox, figured the mountains might have cleaner air than Virginia battlefields." Lillian nodded, understanding his reluctance to elaborate. "I'm sorry." "That was impertinent of me." "Not at all, just not much more to tell." He paused outside the general store. "I reckon you'll need supplies for the schoolhouse. Mr. Wilson keeps a fair inventory, though anything special might need ordering from Denver." Grateful for the change of subject, Lillian allowed him to escort her inside. The store was well stocked for a frontier town, and Mr. Wilson proved helpful in assembling what she would need. "Put it on the school account," Adam instructed when she reached for her purse. Mayor's supposed to provide basic supplies. Over the following days, Lillian fell into a pleasant routine. Mornings were spent preparing lessons and cleaning up the long-neglected schoolhouse. Afternoons often found her at Mrs. Holloway's, sewing baby clothes discreetly when she was alone or helping with chores when she wasn't. Adam appeared regularly, sometimes bringing a book he thought might be useful for her classes, other times offering to repair something at the schoolhouse. His presence became a comfort she hadn't expected, though she carefully maintained a friendly distance. The Sunday before classes were to begin, Lillian attended services at Salida's small church. She sat beside Mrs. Holloway, conscious of the many curious glances cast her way. The minister, Reverend Walsh, had a kind face and a gentle sermon about new beginnings that seemed almost tailored for her. After the service, as congregants mingled outside, Lillian found herself surrounded by mothers eager to meet their children's new teacher. She answered their questions politely, noting how some eyes drifted to her left hand, searching for a wedding ring. "Miss Clarke is a godsend," Mayor Daniels announced loudly, approaching with his wife. "Harvard-educated schoolmaster wouldn't come for what we could pay." A ripple of laughter moved through the group. Lillian smiled diplomatically, though she noticed not everyone seemed equally welcoming. One woman in particular, expensively dressed with elaborately coiffed blonde hair, regarded her with undisguised suspicion. Caroline Blackburn, Mrs. Holloway whispered when she noticed Lillian's discomfort. Owns the largest cattle ranch outside town with her brother, thinks rather highly of herself. Before Lillian could respond, Adam appeared at her side, offering a respectful nod to the assembled women. "Ladies," he greeted them, then turned to Lillian. "Miss Clarke, I've brought those maps we discussed for your geography lessons." Several of the women exchanged knowing glances that made Lillian flush slightly. Adam either didn't notice or chose to ignore them. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Irwin," she replied. "Perhaps you could help me hang them tomorrow after school. I'd be happy to." As the crowd dispersed, Caroline Blackburn made her way toward them, her expensive skirts rustling with each deliberate step. "Adam," she said warmly, ignoring Lillian completely, "we missed you at dinner last Wednesday. Lawrence was quite disappointed." Adam's expression remained pleasant, but Lillian detected a slight tension in his shoulders. "Business kept me, I'm afraid. Please give your brother my apologies." Caroline's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, but do try to make it this Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Finally, she acknowledged Lillian with a cool nod. "Miss Clarke." After she'd gone, Lillian raised an eyebrow. "Not a friend, I take it," Adam sighed. "The Blackburns have been trying to consolidate their influence in the valley. Lawrence fancies himself a future senator and seems to think having the town marshal in his pocket would be useful." "You're the marshal?" Lillian couldn't hide her surprise. She'd seen him wearing a gun. "Of course most men did out here, but never a badge." "Part-time," he explained. "Most days I'm just a rancher with a small spread north of town, but someone needs to keep the peace when necessary." That night Lillian lay awake, her hand resting protectively over the small swell of her stomach that had just begun to show. She'd need to let out her dresses soon or fashion new ones. How long before the townspeople noticed, before the whispers started? Before she lost the teaching position she'd barely begun, the thought of Adam discovering her secret brought an unexpected pang. He'd been nothing but kind, and she'd come to value his friendship. But experience had taught her how quickly kindness could turn to judgment. Her first day of teaching passed in a blur of names, faces, and establishing rules. The children ranged from shy to boisterous, but all seemed eager for education. By afternoon, she'd assessed their varied levels and begun dividing them into appropriate groups. True to his word, Adam arrived after dismissal to help with the maps. He worked efficiently, hanging the colorful charts of the United States, Europe, and the world while Lillian organized her desk. "They're a good bunch," he commented, stepping back to ensure the map of Colorado hung straight. "Miller twins can be handful, but they're sharp as tacks." "You seem to know them all well," Lillian observed. Adam shrugged. "Small town. I've delivered some of them when the doctor couldn't make it in time, taught a few to ride, locked up their fathers when necessary." There was something immensely reassuring about his matter-of-fact competence. Lillian found herself watching him as he worked, admiring the careful precision in his movements. "What?" he asked, catching her gaze. "Nothing," she said quickly. "I'm just grateful for your help." Adam studied her for a moment, then set down his hammer. "Miss Clarke, Lillian, I hope you don't mind my asking, but are you well? You seemed tired today." The concern in his voice nearly undid her. When was the last time anyone had truly worried about her welfare? "I'm fine," she assured him. "Just adjusting to the altitude, I suspect." He didn't look convinced, but nodded. "Mountain air takes some getting used to." As autumn progressed into winter, Lillian found herself increasingly drawn to Adam. He never pressed for details about her past, yet somehow made her feel safe enough that she occasionally shared small pieces of herself, her love of Dickens, her childhood in Chicago, her dream of someday seeing the ocean. In turn, he revealed more about himself. His Virginia upbringing, his reluctant service in the Confederate cavalry, something he spoke of with visible regret. His journey west after losing his family home, and his eventual settlement in Salida after years of drifting. But while their friendship deepened, Lillian carefully maintained certain boundaries. She declined invitations that might lead to more intimate situations, made sure they were never alone together after dark, and gradually altered her clothing to disguise her changing figure. By December, however, concealment was becoming impossible. Her condition, now nearly 5 months along, required increasingly creative adjustments to her wardrobe. The school term would end just before Christmas, and Lillian had resigned herself to the likelihood that she would need to move on before classes resumed in January. Then came the blizzard. It struck with little warning 3 days before Christmas, howling down from the mountains with savage intensity. School had been dismissed early, and Lillian had barely made it back to the boarding house before visibility dropped to mere feet. "Worst storm in 10 years, Mr. Peterson declared as they gathered in Mrs. Holloway's parlor. Outside, the wind screamed like a wounded animal, rattling windows and sending snow cascading down the chimney despite the fire. Mrs. Holloway bustled about, distributing hot chocolate and extra blankets. Thank the Lord all the children got home safely. Pounding at the door startled them all. Mrs. Holloway opened it to find Adam covered in snow, his face grim. "The Henderson place," he said without preamble. "Their roof collapsed. They're sheltering in the barn, but Sarah's time has come early." Lillian stood immediately. "They need help." "I'm heading there now," Adam confirmed. "Dr. Morris is stuck on the other side of the river." "Mrs. Holloway, if you could prepare, I'm coming with you," Lillian interrupted. At his startled look, she added, "I assisted at several births in St. Louis." Adam looked ready to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. "It's a mile out of town and the trail's nearly invisible." "Then we shouldn't waste time." Mrs. Holloway hurried to gather supplies: clean linens, her medical kit, whiskey for pain. Within minutes, Lillian found herself bundled onto Adam's sturdy gelding, seated behind him with her arms wrapped tightly around his waist. The journey was nightmarish: blinding snow, biting cold, and the constant fear of straying from the path. Adam navigated by instinct more than sight, occasionally dismounting to check their bearings before pressing on. When they finally reached the Henderson farm, the scene was chaos. Mr. Henderson had moved his wife and 3 young children to the relative safety of the barn, but Sarah Henderson was already well into labor, moaning in pain atop a makeshift bed of hay and blankets. "Thank God," Mr. Henderson said hoarsely when he saw them. His children huddled together, wide-eyed and frightened. Lillian shed her outer garments and moved immediately to Sarah's side, assessing the situation while Adam and Mr. Henderson tended to the horse and secured the barn doors against the storm. "How long between pains?" she asked, rolling up her sleeves. "Few minutes," Sarah gasped. "Coming faster now." Working quickly, Lillian organized the available supplies, positioning lanterns for better light and instructing Mr. Henderson to keep the children occupied at the far end of the barn. Adam assisted without being asked, heating water over a small fire and following her directions without question. Hours passed in a blur of focused activity. Sarah was strong but exhausted, the baby stubbornly reluctant to make its appearance. As midnight approached, Lillian began to worry. "The baby's turned wrong," she whispered to Adam. "I need to try to shift it." He nodded grimly, moving to hold Sarah's shoulders while Lillian worked. The woman's screams as Lillian maneuvered her hands to turn the infant made the children cry out in fear. "Almost there," Lillian soothed, though her own arms ached with effort. "One more big push when I tell you." With a final, tremendous effort, Sarah bore down. Moments later, a tiny, slippery form emerged into Lillian's waiting hands, silent at first, then letting out a robust wail that echoed through the barn. "A girl," Lillian announced, quickly wiping the infant clean and wrapping her in a soft blanket before placing her in her mother's eager arms. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Relief flooded the barn. Mr. Henderson wept openly, gathering his other children to meet their new sister. Adam squeezed Lillian's shoulder, his eyes filled with something that made her heart beat faster. As she worked to deliver the afterbirth and ensure Sarah was comfortable, Lillian suddenly felt lightheaded. The hours of tension, the physical exertion, and her own condition combined to send the room spinning. She swayed slightly, putting out a hand to steady herself. Adam was beside her instantly, one strong arm supporting her. "Lillian, just tired," she murmured, but even as the words left her mouth, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She gasped, clutching at her midsection. Adam's expression changed from concern to shock as his hand, still supporting her, registered the firm roundness of her stomach. His eyes widened, meeting hers with a question she couldn't answer as another pain gripped her. "Mr. Henderson," Adam called, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Could you tend to your wife for a moment? Miss Clarke needs rest." He guided her to a clean pile of hay on the opposite side of the barn, helping her sit while keeping his voice low. "How far along?" Lillian closed her eyes, mortification warring with the need for help. "5 months," she whispered, "but something's wrong. It's too early for these pains." Adam's face darkened with worry. "What can I do?" "Water," she managed, "and perhaps it's just exhaustion." He brought water, then a cool cloth for her forehead. The cramping gradually subsided, leaving Lillian weak but relieved. When she was certain the crisis had passed, she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I should have told you," she said softly. "You had no obligation to tell me anything," Adam replied, though something in his tone suggested hurt beneath the words. "Nevertheless, Lillian began, but he gently cut her off. "Rest now, we'll talk when you're stronger." The blizzard continued through the night, forcing them to remain at the Henderson farm. By morning, Lillian felt well enough to help with the new mother and baby, though she was acutely aware of Adam's eyes following her movements, his expression unreadable. When the storm finally abated enough for travel, Mr. Henderson insisted on driving them back to town in his sleigh. The journey passed in awkward silence, Lillian wrapped in blankets, Adam vigilant beside her but maintaining a careful distance. At Mrs. Holloway's, he helped her inside, then paused on the porch. "I need to check on others who might be stranded," he said formally. "Please rest, Miss Clarke." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Lillian with the sinking realization that she had lost something precious before it had truly begun. Mrs. Holloway, bless her heart, asked no questions when Lillian finally confessed her condition later that day. "I suspected as much," she said kindly. "Your secret's safe with me, child. But not for much longer," Lillian said, gesturing to her now obvious pregnancy. "Once the town knows." "This isn't the first time Salida's seen an unmarried mother," Mrs. Holloway replied pragmatically, "though I won't pretend it won't cause talk." That evening, as Lillian sat alone in her room, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Adam standing there, hat in hand, his expression solemn. "May I speak with you?" he asked quietly. Heart-pounding, Lillian stepped back to admit him, then returned to her seat by the small writing desk. Adam remained standing, turning his hat in his hands. "I owe you an apology," he began, surprising her. "I had no right to." "You have nothing to apologize for," Lillian interrupted. "I'm the one who deceived everyone." Adam shook his head. "You protected yourself as any woman would in your circumstances." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The father." Lillian's eyes dropped to her hands. "He left when I told him, said it would ruin his prospects." "Then he never deserved you." The simple declaration, spoken with such conviction, brought tears to her eyes. Adam crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling before her chair to take her hands in his. "Lillian, I don't pretend to know all you've endured, but I want you to know that my regard for you has only grown. Your courage, your kindness, your strength, they humble me." She looked up, astonished to see such tender sincerity in his face. "Adam, I can't ask you to, you're not asking. I'm offering." He squeezed her hands gently. "Not marriage, not yet, that would be presumptuous, but my protection, my support, my friendship. Those are yours if you want them." Lillian studied him, searching for any hint of pity or obligation. She found only warmth and a steadfast certainty that took her breath away. "The town will talk," she warned. Adam's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Let them. I've never much cared for others' opinions of my affairs." For the first time in months, Lillian felt hope unfurling in her chest. "I would be honored to accept your friendship, Marshal Irwin." Christmas came, bringing with it a fresh blanket of snow and a tentative peace to Lillian's heart. Adam joined her and the other boarders for Mrs. Holloway's Christmas dinner, then lingered afterward to present Lillian with a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside was a delicate silver locket, simple but beautifully crafted. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I thought, for the baby someday." The gesture brought fresh tears, happy ones this time. "It's perfect," she whispered, impulsively kissing his cheek. As December melted into January, Adam became a constant presence in Lillian's life. He escorted her to and from the schoolhouse each day, joined her for Sunday services, and somehow managed to be nearby whenever curious townsfolk approached with questions about her increasingly visible condition. Not everyone approved. Caroline Blackburn made her disapproval particularly clear. snubbing Lillian openly and spreading thinly veiled rumors about her character. To Lillian's surprise, however, many in Salida rallied to her defense, particularly after the story of her assistance during Sarah Henderson's difficult birth circulated. "You've earned their respect," Adam told her one evening as they sat on Mrs. Holloway's porch despite the winter chill. "And those who can't see your worth aren't worth your worry." February brought warmer days and the first stirrings of spring. It also brought a letter that arrived on the weekly mail coach from Denver, a letter addressed to Lillian in an elegant, familiar hand that made her blood run cold. Harrison had found her. The letter was brief but calculated, expressing regret for his hasty departure and suggesting he might reconsider their situation. Reading between the lines, Lillian understood that his circumstances incensed. Louis had changed. Likely his father had discovered his indiscretion, and he now saw Lillian and the child as potentially useful to him. "He wants to come here," she told Adam that evening, the letter crumpled in her trembling hands. "He says he wants to make amends." Adam's expression darkened. "Do you want to see him?" "No," the certainty in her voice surprised even her. "No, I don't. Whatever we had was a lie. I see that now." "Then write and tell him so," Adam suggested, though his jaw remained tight. "Or don't write at all." Lillian chose the former, composing a clear, firm response declining Harrison's offer and requesting he respect her wishes not to be contacted again. She thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. 2 weeks later, Harrison Pennington arrived in Salida on the afternoon stage, impeccably dressed in city clothes that looked absurdly out of place on the muddy Main Street. Lillian, walking home from school with her students, froze when she saw him step down from the coach. "Lillian." He called, striding toward her with the confident air of a man accustomed to getting his way. "My dear, you look well." His hesitation as he took in her obviously pregnant form spoke volumes. The children around her stared with open curiosity. "Children, please continue on home," Lillian said calmly. "We'll resume our lesson tomorrow." As they dispersed, Harrison moved closer, lowering his voice. "I received your letter, of course, but I felt we should discuss matters face to face." "There's nothing to discuss," Lillian replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My decision is final." Harrison's handsome features hardened slightly. "You're being hasty. I'm prepared to do the right thing now. My father has, Miss Clarke." Adam's voice interrupted whatever Harrison had been about to say. He approached from the direction of the marshal's office, his expression carefully neutral though his eyes assessed the situation with quick precision. "Marshal Irwin," Lillian acknowledged, relief washing through her. "This is Mr. Pennington from St. Louis, an acquaintance." Adam's gaze sharpened. "The father." It wasn't a question. Harrison straightened, clearly affronted by Adam's tone. "And you are a friend," Adam replied simply. "Miss Clarke appears to be uncomfortable with this conversation." "Perhaps you'd prefer to continue it elsewhere." Harrison's lip curled slightly. "This is a private matter between Lillian and myself. Not if she doesn't wish it to be." The tension between the two men was palpable. Lillian placed a hand on Adam's arm, as much to steady herself as to calm him. "I've said all I need to say, Harrison. Please respect my decision." For a moment, Harrison looked ready to argue, but something in Adam's stance seemed to give him pause. "Very well. But I'll be staying at the hotel for a few days. We can speak again when you've had time to reconsider." After he'd gone, Adam turned to Lillian. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said, though her heart still raced. "I just never expected him to actually come here." Adam's expression was troubled. "Men like that don't accept rejection easily. Would you like me to speak with him?" "No," Lillian said quickly. "That would only provoke him. I know Harrison, he'll lose interest once he realizes I won't be persuaded." But Harrison proved more persistent than she'd anticipated. Over the next few days, he appeared wherever Lillian went outside the schoolhouse, at church, even at Mrs. Holloway's front door, bearing expensive chocolates and forced apologies. His smooth words and handsome face might once have swayed her, but Lillian found herself unmoved. Instead, it was Adam's quiet strength she found herself turning to, his steady presence a balm to her troubled spirit. Then came the night Harrison appeared at the boarding house, clearly having indulged in too much whiskey at the saloon. "I won't be made a fool of," he slurred, forcing his way into the parlor where Lillian sat reading. "Not by a seamstress who got herself into trouble." Mrs. Holloway appeared from the kitchen, brandishing a rolling pin. "You'll leave my house this instant, sir." Harrison ignored her, advancing on Lillian. "You think I don't know about your cowboy, Marshal? The whole town's talking about how he's taken up with you. Did you tell him the child might be his? Is that your game?" Lillian stood, one protective hand on her rounded belly. "You're drunk, Harrison. Go back to the hotel." "Not until you agree to return to St. Louis with me," he insisted, grabbing her arm. "I won't be humiliated like this." The front door crashed open and Adam stood framed in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "Let her go, now." Harrison released Lillian but turned to face Adam with drunken belligerence. "This isn't your concern, Marshal. You're disturbing the peace, threatening a lady and trespassing," Adam replied evenly. "That makes it very much my concern." What happened next unfolded so quickly Lillian barely had time to process it. Harrison lunged forward, swinging wildly at Adam, who sidestepped with practiced ease. In one fluid motion, Adam subdued the other man, pinning his arm behind his back. "You have a choice," Adam said quietly, his mouth close to Harrison's ear. "You can spend the night in my jail cell to sober up, or you can pack your things and be on tomorrow's stage back to Denver. But either way, you're done frightening Miss Clarke." Harrison struggled briefly, then sagged in defeat. "Fine, you're jail, but this isn't over." After Adam had escorted him out, Lillian sank back into her chair, trembling with reaction. Mrs. Holloway brought her tea laced with brandy, patting her hand soothingly. "That man," she huffed. "Good riddance to bad rubbish, I say." Later that night, unable to sleep, Lillian heard a soft tap at her window. She peered out to see Adam standing in the garden below, his face tilted up toward her. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she slipped downstairs and out the back door to meet him. "Harrison's locked up safe," he assured her immediately. "But I wanted to make sure you were all right." In the pale moonlight, his concern was so evident, so genuine, that something broke loose inside Lillian. Tears she'd been holding back for months suddenly flowed freely. "I was such a fool," she sobbed. "I believed everything he said, every promise he made." Adam gathered her gently into his arms, letting her cry against his chest. "You weren't a fool," he murmured into her hair. "You were betrayed by someone who should have protected you. There's no shame in that." When her tears finally subsided, Lillian remained in the circle of his arms, drawing comfort from his warmth. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Adam's hand came up to cup her cheek. "That depends on you," he said. "But if you'll allow it, I'd like to court you properly. Not just as a friend, but as a man who's come to care deeply for you." Lillian looked up at him, searching his face in the moonlight. "Even with—" Her hand moved to her stomach. "Especially with," Adam replied firmly. "That child is part of you, Lillian. How could I not embrace them as well?" The next morning, Adam personally escorted Harrison to the stagecoach, standing watch as it departed to ensure he was truly gone. Lillian, watching from Mrs. Holloway's window, felt a profound sense of closure as the coach disappeared from view. Spring blossomed across the valley, bringing new life and new beginnings. Lillian continued teaching, her students unfazed by her condition once the initial curiosity had passed. Adam courted her openly, accompanying her to social gatherings and church functions, making his intentions clear to anyone who cared to notice. There were still whispers, of course, and occasional cold shoulders. Caroline Blackburn continued her campaign of subtle disdain, though her influence waned as more and more of Salida's residents embraced Lillian as one of their own. By May, Lillian's time was near. Adam had prepared a small cabin on his ranch for her and the baby, though they had agreed she would remain at Mrs. Holloway's until after the birth. "Are you certain this is what you want?" Lillian asked him one evening as they sat on the porch swing. "Taking on another man's child, enduring the gossip." Adam took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "What I want is you, Lillian Clarke, you and this child and whatever other children might follow, a family of our own making." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. This isn't how I plan to ask, but will you marry me, Lillian? Not because you need protection or because of the baby, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible." Tears of joy sprang to Lillian's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." They were married 2 days later in a small ceremony at the church with Mrs. Holloway and Mayor Daniels as witnesses. Reverend Walsh kept the service brief but meaningful, and if anyone in town disapproved, they kept their opinions to themselves. Elizabeth Ann Irwin was born 3 weeks later, arriving with considerably less drama than the Henderson baby, but with equal determination. She had Lillian's dark hair and delicate features, and from the moment Adam first held her, it was clear he considered her entirely his own. "She's perfect," he whispered, cradling the tiny bundle with astonishing gentleness for such large hands. Just like her mother. Summer passed in a haze of happiness as they settled into life on Adam's ranch. Lillian continued teaching when the fall term began, bringing Elizabeth with her each day in a basket beside her desk. The arrangement raised a few eyebrows initially, but the infant proved remarkably good-natured, and the students soon considered her an honorary classmate. Adam expanded the cabin, adding a nursery and a proper kitchen. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together, Elizabeth sleeping against Lillian's shoulder, and watch the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. "Do you ever regret it?" Lillian asked one night. "Taking us on," Adam looked at her with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "Not for a single moment," he replied, leaning over to kiss her softly. "You and Elizabeth are the best thing that ever happened to me." As Elizabeth grew from infant to toddler, it became increasingly clear that Adam was the only father she would ever know or need. Harrison never returned, though occasionally letters arrived from St. Louis, which Lillian returned unopened. When Elizabeth was 2, Adam officially adopted her, making legal what had been true in his heart from the beginning. That same year, Lillian discovered she was expecting again, this time Adam's child. "A brother or sister for Lizzie," Adam said, his face alight with joy when she told him. "Our family is growing." Thomas James Irwin arrived on a snowy December night with Dr. Morris in attendance and 4-year-old Elizabeth peering curiously at her new brother from the safety of Mrs. Holloway's arms. "He has your eyes," Lillian told Adam as they gazed down at their son. "And I think your stubborn chin." Adam laughed, gathering both his wife and newborn son into a gentle embrace. "Heaven help us all." The years that followed brought more children, Sarah in 1881, and twin boys, Robert and William, in 1883, along with the inevitable challenges and joys of family life. Adam continued as Salida's marshal until the twins were born, then focused entirely on the ranch, which had prospered under his careful management. Lillian eventually handed over her teaching position to a younger woman from Denver, choosing instead to establish a small library in town, open to all Salida's residents regardless of age or circumstance. Elizabeth grew into a beautiful, thoughtful young woman with her mother's intelligence and her adoptive father's quiet strength. If she ever wondered about her biological father, she never mentioned it, content in the knowledge that she was unconditionally loved by the man who had chosen to be her dad. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Adam surprised Lillian with a trip to California, her first glimpse of the ocean she had dreamed of seeing since childhood. Standing on the beach at sunset, her hair now streaked with silver but her eyes as bright as ever, Lillian leaned back against her husband's chest. "Are you happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist just as they had so many years ago outside Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. Lillian turned in his embrace, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Completely," she answered. "You gave me everything I never dared to hope for, Adam, a home, a family, a love that grows stronger with each passing year." "You gave me the same," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "When you walked into Salida that day, you changed my world forever." As the sun sank into the vast Pacific, painting the sky in colors no artist could capture, Lillian thought back to that frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in a dusty Colorado town, carrying nothing but a trunk, a broken heart, and an uncertain future. "He left when I told him," she had whispered to Adam so long ago, shame and fear coloring her words. "Then he never deserved you," Adam had replied, a simple truth that had illuminated the path to happiness she had never expected to find. In that moment, watching the day end in spectacular beauty with the love of her life beside her, Lillian knew with absolute certainty that sometimes life's greatest heartbreaks led to its greatest blessings. All it took was the courage to keep moving forward, and perhaps, if you were truly fortunate, Someone who believed in you enough to walk beside you, no matter what the journey might bring.